All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 5:45 special meeting of the Berlin Board of Education. This is our budget meeting. It is 5:51, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. So we are going to start out with, I'm going to present the budget that will be voted on later this evening at our 7 o'clock meeting. After I present the budget, then I am going to invite the superintendent up, and we will answer any questions. And that is what we have in store for this meeting. If we do end early, we will not be starting the next meeting early. We are going to be waiting until 7 o'clock, and then we will come back and begin the meeting. All right, so good evening, everyone. Our budget process starts around November, December. The superintendent works with school administrators. They get the budgets, the proposed budgets, what they're asking for, and then the superintendent decides if the asks will go into the budget or not. Then it comes to us. He presents, and we go through a number of workshops to get to the number. And tonight, we will be voting as this is an agenda item. So the goals for the Berlin Public Schools, I think it's important to ground our number in the goals, because in order to fulfill the goals and support all students, we need adequate funding. So our goals are to continue to provide quality education to all students at the standard that Berlin parents expect. Provide all students with an education that prepares them for multiple options and opportunities upon graduation. Maintain favorable class sizes and adequate course offerings. Consistent support for technology use with adequate funding of hardware, software, infrastructure, and IT support. An ongoing commitment to implement safety measures, equipment, and systems that provide all students and staff a safe learning environment. And our numbers are grounded in these goals. So our proposed budget, we are coming in at a 4.67% increase. Our total ask is $50,112,596. 3.68 are contractual obligations. Our contractual obligations are not out of the norm in the state amongst other districts or in comparison to the town raises. Here I've highlighted the contractual obligations. You can see those in the blue on the stacked bar. Those are the contractual obligations, and I've bulleted them out on the left-hand side so you can see it a little more clear. 3.68%, and that is $1,759,940 as the increase. That includes certified salaries, non-certified salaries, administrative salaries, and employee benefits. Everything else in the budget, which is on the very top part, is a 0.95% increase, which is $477.24, sorry. And that includes contracted services, transportation and utilities, supplies, materials, textbooks, equipment, tuition, and a new staff HR increase. There's been inflation. Inflation is real, and we are seeing it, and that is, typically why you will see an increase in our budget year over year. Though some think that we should have a flat budget, a 0%, we should not be funding our teachers, or they should not be getting raises. Inflation is impacting everyone nationwide, within our state, and within our town. These are our contractual obligations. So we have certified staff. We went to negotiations this year. It was a long process. We settled below the state. If we went to arbitration, we would have lost, and they would have received more, so it's important to bring that up. Administrators have a 2.5% increase. Non-certified salaries, 3% increase. And again, everything is done through collective bargaining. And the benefits, which is set by the town, it's expected to be 10%. So we receive that number from the town. There's nothing we can do about that. And then you can see the figures. So I just want to show the full-time educator certified staff. This is our 6-year comparison of teachers and certified staff we've had. In 2016 to 17, we had 279.32 certified staff. We adjusted appropriately as we needed to, and you can see that number went down, and now we're up to 270.3. Due to the pandemic, there was so much learning loss. We have to be responsible and make sure that the kids are learning, and we have the staff we need to meet the needs of our community. We can't just say, let's make bigger classes, shove a bunch of kids in a room, and say, oh well, kids, this is for our community and the future of our town. So that's where we were last year for 2021, 2022, and that's our full-time educator certified staff comparison. Our administrators, that's a 2.5% increase for administrator step. Again, annual contract increase. Non-certified salaries, when you look at all the bargaining groups, that's approximately a 3% increase. Increased funding for custodial overtime. And we have 50-50 cost sharing for paraprofessionals at Central Connecticut Transition Academy. So the benefits, those are set by the town. That is the 10% increase with the benefits. It could change, but it needs to be appropriately budgeted, and that's the direction we received. The employer percent for staff groups has been adjusted to meet the contractual obligations for each group. So at this point, it's the most accurate representation we have. Other fiscal obligations that the district has is less than a % increase, and like I spoke of, there is inflation, so realistically, we need to adequately budget for that. And you can see there isn't much here. And under the line item, all other expenditures, we have a negative instead of an increase. This is our budget funding history from 2013 to 2020, to what we propose. So we do want to say that we have acknowledged the Town Council and the Board of Finance for providing us adequate funding over the past few years so we can catch up, fulfill this funding gap, and make sure that we remain competitive. That's like our #1 priority. On the Board of Education, I know for me and my fellows that sit with me, we are pro-education. It is our job to advocate for appropriate funding. It's also our job to question and to look at things, which we have. We received over 90 questions questioning the budget, but this is, we are now caught up and we want to stay there to maintain. So you can see what we came in at with the blue, that was our ask. And then you can see what we got, which is under the green line and the black. So this year we're coming in at 4.67, so we will see where we land. These are our town comparisons and the 5-year average increase. So we are right in the middle with these towns right here. And then again, just to summarize, because I'm finishing up, these are our goals for the district. In order for our district to achieve our goals, we need to pay attention to inflation. We need to pay attention to the pandemic. We need to pay attention to learning loss and learning recovery, social, emotional, making sure our students are supported as they get back to normal. That's #1. We need to make sure that our students thrive and we're providing them a place to do so. And that is all grounded in our goals. And I want to conclude with a school district budget reflects the commitment of the community to invest in the future of our children, the erosion of funding for education challenges, the sustainability of Berlin as a competitive school district with rich educational and extracurricular opportunities for our students. So, if we do face a decline in funding or not adequate funding to fulfill contractual obligations, it's going to be personnel and programs that will get cut. You'll see larger class sizes, you'll see less programs and opportunities for your students. So that is all I have for my presentation this evening. So I will now invite the superintendent up and we can take questions. So I will start out with the Board of Education, see if you guys have any questions, and we'll open it up to the floor. Do you guys have any questions from the board? Nope. So if you are in the audience, you can come up to the microphone, state your name and your address. You can ask your question, and we will respond.
Good evening. My name is George Millard. I live at 1231 Orchard Road in Kensington. And just in full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Board of Finance. So I've spent a little bit of time with much more of the detail on this. And I just had first a couple of comments, or a couple of comments, and then a question. So with regard to the chart that looked at averages across those 8 schools or 7 schools that you looked at, I gotta find it. I wasn't really sure what that meant, because average numbers without any relative background doesn't really tell you a whole lot. So what I ended up doing, just for my own knowledge and make sure I'm trying to prep to understand what's really going on, I went into these schools and I looked at the per pupil expenditures for 2021 and 2022. I actually looked at all the years and whatever. And I think this, I don't know what was the purpose of this or what was trying to be said here. But when I looked at it, and I looked at it the per pupil expenditure, which I think is an important figure in terms of how much do we actually invest in our students and so forth, these numbers are markedly different. If you go and do that exercise, Berlin actually out of this group has the second highest per pupil expenditure out of all these schools with the exception of Glastonbury. And I don't think we really compare very favorably to Glastonbury in terms of the amount of money people make and how much they put into their school systems. They're a much more richer town. So to me, this was a little bit misleading in terms of this presentation and not really showing the true picture that Berlin ranks pretty high towards the top in these schools. So just so people are aware that I think from that perspective, we're doing pretty good. The next one was the budget funding history. And again, I'm not sure what the message here is. I could tell you, I can infer a message that's not a good message to tell people. I mean, it seems like there's a consistent pattern of overstating your needs because you haven't gotten anywhere near what you've needed in the last couple years if one's to believe that the funding request is the absolute bare bones of what you need to provide what you do, but yet I don't hear anything detrimental in terms of the level of service or the quality of the education and so forth. So this pattern tells me, in general, we're always asking, 1.5% to 2% over what you actually settle for without any detrimental effect. So that's just my observation. You've got to be careful with graphs in terms of what they're showing people. Now my question, I guess, in terms of the contractual obligations, can you define exactly, I guess, in terms of salaries, step increases, or whatever, what do you mean by contractual obligation? And the reason I ask that is my understanding is, everybody kind of has a lot of the towns, I believe, are on sort of the same type of union contracts, have a lot of the same terms and conditions. I have 2 daughters that are teachers. One taught in Lebanon for a long, long time. Now she's actually a vice principal up in New Hampshire. But my other one still teaches, taught in Norwich for a long time, and now is a head librarian for the high school at Portland High School and Portland Middle School. And I was talking to her the other day, and in terms of contractual, so there's a agreed upon increase in salary, there's the step increases, whatever, but then she tells me that some of their teachers there haven't gotten any step increases for 4 or 5 years because they don't have the money. So I guess what does it mean to be a contractual obligation?
Thank you for your questions. Are those all
That-
of your
that's
questions?
it,
Okay.
yes.
So first off, I would like to go back and apologize that I did not include the per pupil expenditures. This is a macro overview throughout all our budget presentations, which are available online. That's where we really did our micro dive into the budget and really focus on these numbers. So I will let the superintendent talk about this particular, this actually has nothing to do with per pupil, this chart. This has to do with when you look at the adopted budget each year, what the average is. So would you like to add to that?
So this chart has been used for a number of years, and you asked, as a math person, what does this chart show? This shows the adopted budget number that each town has given the Board of Education in these towns. Up until the last 3 years where we received 3%, Berlin was in the bottom of these towns. So what we're trying to represent here is the same thing we represented for the last 4 years or 5 years, is where we are relative to the other towns and how much the town is approving, or the public is approving, to go to the Board of Education, which I think is a very relevant number. If other districts can operate at 1% or 2%, and we're operating for 5 or 6 years at 1%, that is a deficit, you know, and I know what we said is the number of students that may be in the school or things that are changing. So that's what this represents. And I really think being at 2.49 and being right in the middle is a great place to be, and we've said that repeatedly. I want to shift to the second part. You talked about the per pupil expenditure. I think if you look into how per pupil expenditure is calculated in each town, it is different based on how certain accounts are accounted for, meaning how the schools are repaired, how the maintenance department is put into place, and so on. We also had my full presentation. There is a chart that shows for our DERG, which is our reference group. It does show that we're about in the middle. It is true, and if you do these towns here, we will be in the second spot for what we spend per pupil. But I don't think you look at one without the other. That's why in the full report, you'll see both this chart as well as the per pupil expenditure.
Thank you. Yep, please.
So the State Department of Education, they recently provided new information effective of January 2022. And as of that data, our net per pupil expenditure has actually gone down than what we reported in October. So we're actually less in ranking for the per pupil based on the information we had when we first did this for our DERG.
Thank you.
That's Ashley Dorsey, who spoke. She's our finance director. In looking and presenting the budget, we were aware that the state report was a little late in getting out this year, and looking at the per pupil, but it's not something that we don't share. It's been in every budget report. It's not hidden information. And we also think it's important, but how it's calculated is different town to town.
So then going to the next question, the budget funding history. This is actually a positive slide. So we did come in at 5.96, at 5.36, at 4.56. There have been reductions, especially if I go back. There's a number of reductions, and I could have highlighted that, but again, this was meant to be a macro overview, very high level. This is our budget. Our other budget presentations are available. We have like an hour to get through this and take questions. So, you know, again, I could have included it, but I did not. But here you can see, year over year, we've reduced the number of teachers. We brought them back last year. But we did make adjustments. We also reduced administrators, and there's a number of other reductions each year that we did to, you know, be able to operate at the 3.2, 3.21, 3.20, and 3.17. So we came in asking, Superintendent Benigni's asks were higher when he presented the budget initially. We came down, he brings it down to those numbers that you see in the blue, and then what we get is at the green. So we perceive this as positive. Do you want to add anything
Sure.
to this?
I think it's important to look at this graph as well as look at the last chart. And then when you take the average, you would see the 2.5 or 2.48, would be that green line is where it averages out for the last 5 years, not the 3.1. But getting the 3% over the last 3 years has brought us into an appropriate average compared to the other towns. And we've obviously have thanked the town, Board of Finance, as well as the town council, and all the people that came out and supported it. It's also important, the last piece is you spoke about the contracts and how districts have different contracts. Teachers and administrators, usually most contracts are 3-year contracts. In those 3 years, a number of times we have had groups hold to a 0. And I was asked by members of the Board of Finance, why didn't you hold the teachers at a 0 this year? We had board members on the negotiation committee, and the reason why we didn't hold teachers at a 0 or even ask for a 0 is that the state average was much greater than even what we settled on, and other districts were not going out and asking for a 0. If that's the case, and it's not in this presentation, Berlin's wealth ranking is 60th out of 169 towns. Yet the amount that's spent on education ranks 100 out of 169 towns. When you go to negotiations, which going as far as to arbitration, which is the last step, which approximately $50,000 to go to arbitration, when they decide on whether a town should be able to afford what the contract is, they look at what other contracts are settling at, but they also look at the town's ability to pay. They look at the wealth ranking being 60 and only spending at 100. We then listen to what our lawyers say, whether we would win or lose in arbitration, as they represent, probably our law firm probably represents 80% of the districts in the state. At that point, we decided that it was not worth trying to go to arbitration, trying to ask for a 0 when no other town that we're aware of was asking teachers to hold for a 0 after going through the pandemic. So that's the part with the contract. Have there been 0s in the past? Absolutely. But in this case, asking for a 0 didn't seem prudent and didn't feel as though we would actually win in the end, and we would waste more money going to arbitration to accomplish that. We were fortunate that we did settle below the state average in Hartford area for teachers for this current year. And as Julia said, I can assure you that the raises that people are receiving that are in unions or without unions are very similar to what the town receives for their unions. It's not as though the board is approving contracts that are out of line.
And also to the point about why some teachers in other districts receive raises and don't based on the contract, it all depends on where you max out. So it's in some contracts at 14 years you max out, so you no longer receive that step increase. Others go as far as 20 years. And so, when you're comparing Berlin's teacher contract to another town, it's really hard to state accurately what those parameters are without looking at both contracts. But, Berlin's contract is not out of the ordinary. And quite frankly, it's important that we take care of our certified staff and our non-certified staff, because we want to make sure that Berlin is a town that people want to educate their children. And, it does more for all of us with our property taxes, our community, but it's for the children. This is for the children, and you want the best qualified educators. So, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think just the last piece moving forward, given the economic times and what we're dealing with as far as recruiting teachers and hiring teachers at this time, there's definitely a teacher shortage out there. It's not something that's made up, and we will be competing against other towns to get those best teachers to come to Berlin. So going and having a contract that's not competitive, and my position has been, as a superintendent, it's not that we have to be at the top of the step, we just have to be competitive with others. What we have to offer as far as the students they get to work with, the learning environment, the resources they get in Berlin make us very competitive. So the pay just needs to be competitive. And that's been the message that's been conveyed for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience regarding the budget? Are there any questions from the board regarding the budget? Would anyone from the board like to address anything that has been asked or discussed? What? Okay. So, again, just restating these goals, you know, we need to continue to provide a quality education to all students at the level that the parents expect. Parents chose to move to this town to educate their children. They can also choose to move out, and there's also choice within schools. CREC has about a 12% increase for magnet schools for next year. So if we don't provide that, we still have to pay that tuition for the CREC schools, and it's gone up 12%. So as you can see, we have tuition in here, which is accounting for the increase, but if we start to let our schools fall, then more parents are going to take advantage of that school choice and send their students elsewhere, and Berlin Public Schools has to pay, and then we're gonna be paying approximately 12% on top of what we're currently paying. So we have a commitment to families and students. We have a commitment to prepare students for graduation and multiple opportunities, and that starts in pre-K and kindergarten. We have to maintain favorable class sizes because, again, families moved here and families chose Berlin Public Schools to educate their children. I don't know any parent that wants 25 to 30 kids crammed in an elementary school classroom. I don't, because parents want favorable class sizes, kids learn better, we have better learning outcomes. The pandemic has proven that technology is a necessary component moving forward, and we need to maintain our technology and have adequate funding, and just, again, the ongoing commitment to implementing safety measures, and that is crucial at this point. And, you know, we have a commitment as a Board of Education to adequately fund our schools, and like previously stated, the erosion of funding for education challenges the sustainability of Berlin as a competitive school district with rich educational and extracurricular opportunities for our students. And I'll state this one last time, where it's going to get impacted if we don't get the funding that we've requested, it's going to be personnel and programs, and that's going to impact the students. So that is all I have, and we will adjourn the meeting at 6:18, and we will be back at 7 o'clock to continue our Board of Education meeting. Thank you.